You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. From the book Voices from the Fallen by Mike Torville. This is the chapter called This is My Problem, Not Yours. Jeff. I started using heroin when I was 53 years old. Whenever I tell people, I get the same startled response. What? At that age? Didn't you know better, Jeff? Not in my wildest dreams did I ever think I'd be a heroin addict. And what about all that stuff about just say no we've heard about for decades? Isn't that what we told our kids to say when confronted with a choice? Shouldn't I have known better? Why was it so difficult for me to follow this straightforward instruction? Well, it's not always that simple. What events could possibly bring a mature grandfather to use heroin? First, I didn't fit into the stereotype, the box I thought drug addicts belonged in. I was a family guy with kids and grandkids and was safely removed from that type of activity. Drinking was my thing. I had to have said yes to someone, right? I said yes to my doctors. When they prescribed OxyContin for my back pain, I followed their professional advice and did as instructed. In fact, I took less than prescribed at first because I didn't need them. I was managing through it, and all was good until my next visit with the doctor. Before I get into the details of what happened next, I should let you know that maybe all wasn't good after all. Starting back in high school and in my late teens, I did my share of drinking, graduated to cocaine, and eventually experimented with acid. I had no inhibitions because it seemed harmless at the time. And didn't everybody do it anyway? I was content hanging out with friends, playing the guitar, working on cars, or going fishing once in a while. A lot changed when I met Donna. We got married in our early 20s and immediately started a family. Stella was born in 1979, and then we were surprised with twins, Anne and Lily, in 1981. Our fourth daughter, Sophia, was born in 1982. My job and my family consumed me, but I still found time to play the guitar or work on my car, and all those activities were perfectly compatible with drinking. I enjoyed them more with a few beers. I was at home, and it didn't bother anybody. When socializing with family or friends, drinking wasn't ever a choice. It was expected. I could always stop if I wanted to, but I had no need to. There were lots of reasons, but I recognized none of them back then. I got up every morning at 3:30 to drive a fork truck at the cement piping company, no matter the weather, and worked until mid to late afternoon. Despite the long days and physically demanding conditions, I was as reliable as the sunrise and did it for 22 years. Donna bore the greater burden of parenting. As hard as it was working outside in the cold, dark mornings in January, dealing with 4 kids under 5 by herself was much more difficult. When school came around, Donna got them all dressed, fed, and ready for the day before she went to work herself. At the end of my workday, I made a point of spending time with my daughters, helping where I could, and seeing them off to bed. I never missed birthdays or special events. My other interests faded, but I still found time to drink. One night of heavy drinking, I gave my guitar to my younger brother Jim, and I wasn't ever getting it back. As a young and healthy but sometimes reckless guy, I was fearless. One day in my early 30s, while pounding not a few too many at a birthday party, I was bouncing on a backyard trampoline doing backflips. What could go wrong there? Thinking I was half my age, I flipped off to the side and landed on the metal edge of the trampoline and then fell flat on my back, full force, on the ground. While lying there, my brother Jim leaned over and said, "What the hell's wrong with you, Jeff? You still think you're 13? I got up, shook it off, and went back to drinking. A few hours later, I stammered off to bed. The next morning, I could hardly walk, but still made it to work Monday morning. The pain persisted, but I endured it without seeing a doctor. I lived with the soreness, but my back was never quite the same. When we had family events, I often made myself scarce. They'd go without me, or I'd find a little spot by myself to drink. Either way, I wasn't the best person to be around. Things went on like this for years. And although Donna and I would fight, mostly about my drinking issues and lack of family participation, I knew she'd never leave me. She said she didn't believe in divorce, so subconsciously I might have felt protected and acted without fear of consequence. Maybe I wanted to be alone after all. Things would be easier, and I wouldn't have to catch shit just because I felt like drinking. Why she made such a big deal of it anyway pissed me off. It didn't affect her. Donna and the kids did all they wanted. If they would just let me be, we'd all be happy. Life went on, with schoolwork, sports events, birthdays, and sleepovers, filled in with tension, arguments, and lots of drinking. And of course, a widening distance between Donna and me. If she had just lightened up a little, things could have been so much easier. I was a responsible employee, provided for my family, and did what a father and husband are supposed to do. What more could anyone ask? I'm entitled to have a few beers, so what? My family and my drinking were under complete control. Looking back, both were not. It's what I want to do. It does not affect you. How many times do I need to get that through your head? It's not your problem, it's mine. Stay away, leave me alone, and we'll all be better off. When I think of how many times I made the statement out loud to Donna, I shudder at the selfishness and disregard I had for those who loved and cared for me. After a fight, I'd see the pain in her eyes as she ran into the other room crying while I stubbornly shouted some undeserved comment back. I'd feel bad for a minute, but it only gave me a reason to pour myself another beer. I was in denial, not conscious denial, but with a dismissive, this will just fade away and we'll all move on feeling. Another incident, another fight, repeat the scene. One Saturday, when I was about 45 years old, a few friends and I were cutting down a large tree. I had roped off a section of the tree and held the rope tight to pull away as my friend began cutting. The rope snapped and I was thrown backward onto the ground. At the time, I felt little pain, but the next morning was sheer agony, and I knew I had a serious problem. It was like the trampoline pain, but 100 times worse. This was when the whole thing started. The thing that turned our lives upside down forever. This time I went to the doctor. I was older and not recovering the same way as I did 10 years earlier. The problem, the doctor stated, was a herniated disc. He prescribed OxyContin and Tylenol. I took the Oxy only as needed, along with the Tylenol, managed through the pain, and went back to work after a few days off. At first this was working, and I took fewer pills than advised. When I went back to the doctor, he prescribed another bottle of 42 more pills. I told him I had plenty left and I didn't really need them. He gave me a puzzled look and said, "That's not the way this is supposed to work." He instructed me to take the pills as indicated to stay ahead of the pain, not wait till I was reacting to it. I set another appointment for 4 weeks, went home, and did exactly as the doctor requested. Why would I question his orders? After 10 days of consistent use, the pills did nothing for me, and I became intolerant. I found myself awake at night, sluggish during the day, another visit, and another 42-pill script. I was also told to take acetaminophen for my gout. I was getting frustrated, feeling crappy, and talked to a few friends at work about it. One of them suggested I crush the Oxy pills and snort them. It would provide quick relief from the sickness I was feeling. He also suggested combining acetaminophen with Oxy to work more efficiently. I felt better, but later suffered headaches and nausea. Now I was going through the supply much quicker. I progressed from 40 to 80 to 200 milligrams a day, and my body became more intolerant of the higher dosage. The more I took, the more I needed to make the sickness go away. I was awake when I was supposed to be sleeping, and sleeping when I was supposed to be awake. The days lost their structure, and I remember it just being dark a lot. This all triggered a desperation, more like a severe panic, of getting more pills to stop it all. I needed the drugs in my body as soon as possible, or I'd get unbearably ill. In fact, I never experienced such terrible sickness in all my life. My body sweat and ached, and the combination of nausea and diarrhea was relentless. I couldn't tell if the sickness I felt caused more anxiety and depression or the other way around, but it was overwhelming, and I would do anything to stop it. The term that describes this, which I learned later, was being dope sick. The more dope sick I got, the more I needed the drugs to feel normal. I knew nothing about addiction and would laugh at the mere notion of it. However, my brain was being programmed to require this drug to function. I ran through my prescription and went back to the doctor for more. He questioned why I needed them so quickly, and I told him I was in a canoe and it tipped over and I lost all my pills. After a few probing questions and a skeptical look, he gave in and told me to be more careful. He saw right through me but gave me a chance I wouldn't get a second time. A guy I knew suggested copying the script for future use. He said all I'd have to do was change the date. I was reluctant but made a copy anyway, just in case. Enough time had gone by and I went back to the doctor to get another script. He didn't forget the canoe story, and of course he brought it up. He asked a few questions, but halfway through my answers he abruptly said, "Never mind, I'm not writing this prescription for you." "Why not?" I snapped back. "I need them." "You've been drinking, and anyone within 10 feet of you can smell it. Go home, Jeff," he said. He lectured me about the dangers of using alcohol and narcotics. Stunned and angry, I left the room before he finished. I'll outsmart him, I thought, as I remembered the copied script I had at home. I brought it to the pharmacy, and it worked, but just once. Next attempt, I wasn't so lucky. Apparently, the doctor notified the pharmacy, or vice versa. I never knew, but it didn't really matter. I paid a heavy price for this prescription forgery. It's a federal offense, and I went to court, paid $5,000 for a lawyer, and was put on probation for a year. I should have known better, but the sickness was so overpowering, I gave in and didn't listen to my conscience. With my legitimate supplier gone, I needed other resources. I couldn't get through the day without it and wouldn't think of nothing else. Drugs first, drinking second, food a distant third. I was addicted and didn't know it. With some digging, I found some people to buy from on the streets. The more I used, the more I needed, and my daily dose went from 200 to 400 milligrams a day, and that didn't come cheap. For a while, this was working, and I didn't get sick from it. I only got sick if I didn't have it. I wasn't using the drug to get high, only to stay normal. It only took the aches and pains away, but the stress and anxiety too. The pills became ineffective, so I kept increasing the dosage to a point where it cost a couple of $1,000s a month to maintain. Life was changing around me, but I didn't seem to notice or even care. My excellent work ethic went from bad to worse, and I eventually lost my job. I blew more money on drugs, and my family relations were suffering. I became lethargic, irresponsible, and no longer recognized who I was. Donna and I were fighting, and after many threats to kick me out of the house, she finally did. I went to rehab, then after a few weeks, I would begin using again. I was simply too preoccupied with drugs and not strong enough to overcome the addiction. Drugs are my only priority. I even sold my tools to get more drugs. Donna, Jeff's wife.
Our daughters, who had all moved out on their own, said I was enabling their father, and they all told me repeatedly that I should kick him out and divorce him. It was the only way he changed, they said. I told them I wanted to keep trying and I wasn't giving up. But Jeff was dismantling our household in more ways than one. I'd find things missing, only to realize later he was selling anything he could get his hands on just to get money to buy drugs. I couldn't understand his behavior, and he no longer resembled the man I married.
I was taking everything away from our family. So many promises were made, and even more broken. In and out of detox, back in rehab, back to my old ways. This went on for years. After enduring this nonsense, who would ever want to deal with me? Pushing the limits of Donna's patience, I was slowly breaking her. I always loved Donna, but the drugs took complete control, and I loved them even more. I needed them, craved them, and nothing else was remotely as important, not even close. I went to buy some Oxy for my usual guy and told him how sick I was. He said he didn't have any, and I freaked out on him. He told me to calm down, and he said he had something else that would make me feel better. He pulled out a few bags of heroin and said it would take care of everything. I told him I knew nothing about heroin, but he insisted it would work and gave me 3 small bags. I snorted through a small straw and waited a few seconds. An instant rush went through my blood, and I got a little dizzy. My head was spinning, and I wanted to throw up. The only thing I thought was, why would anyone ever want to do this? After being dope sick so much, this wasn't the cure I expected. The guy told me I'd get over it quickly and suggested I try again. I was easily persuaded and desperate to make the dope sickness go away. He was right, and from that point on, heroin was my friend. After the instant rush of euphoria, it warmed every inch of my body like being hugged by a warm blanket. Tension and pain disappeared in a whoosh. I snorted at first, but once I tried the needle, I didn't go back. I loved the needle and the instant gratification it provided. I soon graduated to doing speedball, a mix of cocaine and heroin, to enhance the effect. The stimulating effect of cocaine would cancel out the depressant of the heroin, the perfect cocktail. My habit jumped from $2,000 a month to over $3,000. The dealers on the street always said they had a better quality product than the previous stuff I bought. They were brands with their own special stamp on the bag with their color, usually with blue or red. Some were called Batman or Superman, and each had varying amounts of fentanyl. If a particular brand had a reputation for causing deadly overdoses, you would think that would be a warning to stay away. Ironically, the opposite was true. The extra strength takes you that much closer to the ultimate high, and you don't consider the risk. The high-quality, good stuff brought you to the edge of death, or sometimes beyond it. The demand was high, business was competitive, and the dealers fought for their share of customers by luring them with a premium product. The risk of death is often shrugged off for a chance at the best high possible. I was lying a lot to Donna and disappeared for hours, sometimes days. She'd get on my case and I'd say it was my problem and none of her concern. "I'm doing this to me, not you," I'd shout out. To say I was selfish is an understatement. Under my drug-induced state, I believe this was true. The delusion granted me a license to continue drinking and using drugs. It's amazing what you can convince yourself of how brilliantly creative you suddenly become. Or so you think. I thought I could fool people, everyone from my family to doctors to people I worked with, even myself. But at every turn, I was proven not so clever. I went back to the streets to get my heroin and worked up to 4 bags a day, spending any spare money I had.
Anytime you're ready.
Donna.
Jeff was rummaging through the house looking for things to sell. I tried to stop him. I called the police, and when they arrived, they said since we were married, he had as much right to our possessions as I did, and the only way to stop him was to get divorced. Our daughters also insisted I initiate a divorce, which was painful to hear from them. It went against everything I stood for, but I felt increasing pressure to end our marriage, and I was left with no option. I was forced to betray my own belief that marriage is forever, and was angry it came to that. I tried to save our marriage with everything I had, but the pain Jeff put us through was unimaginable, and I couldn't endure any more. Legally, it was the only way to protect what we had, and I still thought maybe Jeff might get the help he needed. I never imagined life without Jeff, and here I was, forced to do the unthinkable.
Donna reached a breaking point, and she kicked me out again. While stuffing my clothes in a large green trash bag, she said the words I've never thought I'd hear. "I'm divorcing you. You need to go now." I was devastated and went straight to my parents' house. They took me in, but of course they weren't thrilled about it. It was either their house or a homeless shelter, or a bed at the detox center, which is where they convinced me to go. So off to the Providence Behavioral Health Center in Holyoke I went. In the meantime, Donna initiated the divorce, and I didn't have the financial or mental capacity to fight it. My parents weren't quite aware of the heroin habit. only the drinking. I lied to them too. I tried to get clean. My intentions were good, but I could not overcome the addiction. At the center, I told them whatever I had to say to get into the methadone clinic. After a few weeks, I was getting sick, so the doctor gave me fentanyl patch, and I immediately broke out in hives. They gave me Vivitrol to block the effect of heroin, but the sickness wouldn't go away. A few weeks later, I went back to my parents' house. Over the next year and a half, I bounced between the detox center, rehabs, and my parents' house. I went to one Christian rehab for 7 months and thought I was making progress. But again, I was too weak to fight against the powers of the drug. I went to another local sober house for 3 months and shared a room with 2 bunk beds and 3 bunkmates. A shared bathroom down the hall accommodated all 16 residents. Downstairs was a kitchen where I could prepare meals I had bought with food stamps. The living room, meeting room, had a TV everyone would fight over. They required us to attend 3 meetings a day. This was a miserable and depressing time. How could I have gone from being a providing husband and father to bunking with smelly strangers using food stamps and fighting over the most trivial things? Who moved my stuff? That's my chair. Who drank my juice? That's what dominated our days. Nobody there gave a shit about me unless I had drugs for them. I was angry, and all my new roommates were too. I got out and tried to stay sober, but it didn't last. The withdrawal was wreaking havoc on my body. The only thing I knew or cared about was that I felt sick without the drugs. I didn't want to be sick, so it seemed natural and easier to feed the brain and body. This is how it went, an endless loop, like the Groundhog Day movie, except rather than waking up in the same bed over and over, I found myself in a detox bed, a rehab unit, a group home, a shelter. The nightmare only deepened. The divorce was final on April of 2018, 2 months shy of our 40th wedding anniversary. I missed my family terribly and never felt so alone, so separated from everyone. It couldn't get any worse than this, and I wanted to escape, but to where? I thought it would be easier for everyone if I just weren't around at all. I drove around Holyoke looking for a quiet place to shoot up. One place after another wouldn't work, so I impatiently pulled a car over on Race Street by the canal. It was around midday, and clusters of people were going about their business, paying no attention to me at all. This will have to work, I thought. I can't wait any longer. I had no idea, no inkling, that this would be my final injection. I rolled up my sleeve, with the needle prepared, put the band on my bicep, and inserted the needle. I pushed the syringe and watched the mixture disappear into my vein. A quick tug, and the needle dropped to the floor. As my eyes rolled back into my head, I was out, with no sense of light or darkness. I was entirely departed from all existence. The sound of heavy breathing was the first thing I remember, like amplified ventilator machine, pulling in air and pushing it back out. With my eyes still closed, the only sensation I had was my chest forcefully expanding and contracting, getting louder with each labored breath. My eyes opened slowly until the blurry images came into focus. I sat motionless, not knowing if I was dead or alive. I had no sense of time and didn't know where I was or how I got there. My eyes scanned the area. It appeared to be late afternoon, and I recognized the factories and the canal. It was all coming back now. I'm still in this damn car. The syringe on the floor told me all I needed to know. The people I had seen earlier were gone, the street void of any activity. Gone too were the cars parked in front and behind me. How long have I been here? 4, maybe 5 hours? My heart raced with so many questions turning through my mind. Who saw me here? What if someone had called the police? For sure, some passerby would have noticed the guy slumped in his car for hours and thought he was dead and called the police. Yet I was left here to die alone. Perhaps I did die, and somehow God spared me and gave me a second chance. The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. I couldn't move a muscle in my body, as if all my circulation had vacated my extremities and flooded my chest to keep my heart and lungs operating. Just breathe, I commanded myself. Just breathe and listen. I closed my eyes again, focused on my breathing, and thank God I was alive. A voice came from somewhere deep inside me, a voice felt more than heard, saying it wasn't about me anymore. It was about Donna, Stella, Ann, Lily, and Sophia. How would they feel if I was found dead by some old factory along a canal from a heroin overdose? It's a hell of a thing to leave your kids with a lifelong trauma they'd have to explain to their children. My grandkids should not have a dead heroin addict for a grandfather. The reality of death hit me in the face so hard I couldn't catch my breath. Overwhelmed with fear, shame, and sadness, I welled up with tears and began shaking uncontrollably. I resolved then not to have my wife and daughters think of me this way. Their last memory of a dad is a heroin addict. How many years had I lost? How much have I hurt my family? There was no more time to waste, no more pain to cause. I needed to salvage my family and live again. I called my daughter Lily, and she may have sensed it was the right time to talk. She told me about the Celebrate Recovery program at her church. Yes, I said, without asking too many questions. I was defeated and more than ready for the journey back to permanent sobriety. I had yet to learn how. That fateful day in the car by the canal could have been my last. It is, in fact, where my old life ended. Recovery is a forever journey, and I am fully aware of the dangers of relapse and know there are no guarantees in life. I think of opiate drugs as the work of the devil. I am certain of it. It's like being possessed by a demon with the most evil deception imaginable. To me, the image that captures it best is the last scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the bad guys open the Ark. The image of a beautiful angel appears, and they're all struck with awe and amazement and shout out, "It's so beautiful." When they all fall under its spell, the face turns demonic, and they all die horribly. Unfortunately, too many addicts have reached that fatal point of no return. It's no different with opiates. They deceive you into thinking it's paradise, but it's really hell. They will suck every ounce of life out of you, maybe slowly or quickly, but it gets the job done. It always goes down the same path of sickness, isolation, anxiety, depression, or death. Nothing but dark, horrible outcomes that ruin lives. There is no life, no family, or any situation that has ever been improved by using heroin or other opiate drugs. I lived with my parents, went to meetings, and stayed sober. I was taking Vivitrol for a while, but the side effects made my body ache. It was still better than the sickness from withdrawal. I had to earn back the trust of my daughters, and even though Donna and I were divorced, I wanted to prove all of them that I could do it. Donna wasn't taking me back, but she tried to be supportive for the sake of our daughters and grandchildren. I tried to talk with Donna about the steps I was taking towards recovery, but she wasn't buying it. After the countless times I broke promises and failed her and our daughters, it was too painful, and she didn't want to suffer through any more relapses and heartache. She reminded me that we divorced for a reason, and I was no longer the person she married. She said she still didn't trust my commitment to remain sober. Donna.
I never wanted the divorce, but I never wanted our lives turned upside down either. It broke my heart, but I told Jeff we had to stay apart. Even through all the difficult times, I knew it was the drugs talking, not him. It was someone else, like something evil, had taken over. I believed Jeff when he said he wanted to stay sober and get back to who he was. But I also knew his actions would have to speak louder than his words.
I understood Donna's position and had to respect it, but I was alive and grateful to God for every day for giving me another chance. Every day is a gift, and every day sober brings me closer to earning back the trust of my family. From that moment of Lily bringing up Celebrate Recovery, I haven't looked back. It has been my lifeline, and I hope to help others get through the hell of addiction and emerge with a productive and happy life the same way the loving and caring people there helped me. If I can do it after 15 years of addiction, I know there is hope for anyone. I know one thing, it cannot be done without the support and love of family, friends, and support groups. Donna slowly allowed me to see her and our daughters more often and even had me over for dinner once in a while. When we were together, we talked and laughed like we hadn't in years, maybe decades. Life looked different through her sober eyes, and I couldn't remember having so much clarity in my brain and my heart. I began to spend more time at home, attended church, and continued with the program at Celebrate Recovery. I brought up an idea that Donna flatly rejected. I wanted to get married again. She said the thought of it terrified her, and she said no. I wanted my family back, but wanted them to want me back as much as I wanted them. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I resolved to work at it with every ounce of strength I had, and I was not giving up. Donna.
During the first year or so of Jeff's recovery, I was encouraged but remained skeptical. After so many years, decades, not years, of drinking and drugs, I was hardened and not easily convinced. There were so many times he would promise it would never happen again, and it always happened again. I made it clear to him that earning back my trust wasn't like a switch I could turn on because he promised something. I wasn't sure when or if that would ever happen. 1 year of being clean wasn't going to erase 15 years of torture. I would always have to be prepared for the day he would fall back, and told him I could never go through it again.
Earlier I mentioned that you couldn't overcome addiction without the love and support of family, friends, and support groups. That's true, but in my case, I could not do it without faith in the power of God. I was without it for so much of my life. I was spiritually vacant and didn't know it. When I accepted God's help, everything changed. When I was going through years of addiction, the last thing I thought about was God. Me, that's who I thought about. I blamed everyone else, the doctor, my family, everyone but me. No one else brought this on but me. My personal feeling is that you don't have to hit bottom before seeking help. People don't need to lose everything before being motivated to change. It's just more wasted years, more damaged relationships, and a deeper financial hole. Oh, how I wished I could have known this and changed at the beginning. But I am sober now, and that matters more than anything. I choose for it to be more powerful than the addiction, more powerful than any regret, guilt, or temptation. I am sustained and supported by the power of love and faith in God. Nothing else is stronger.
Go ahead.
Donna.
Something had changed with Jeff. In the past, whenever a stressful situation arose, I sensed the usual trigger and his desire to use drugs or drink as an escape. Now it was different. He was engaged, focused, and confident. It was truly a remarkable transformation. The difference was that God was now present in our lives. The man I married was returning. Jeff asked me again to marry him, and I finally said yes. We were remarried on June 30th, 2020, our 42nd anniversary. Our daughters and grandchildren were there, and I thank God every day that we have our family back and for the miracle of Jeff's recovery.
Learning how to live clean is more than just stopping drug use. It's relearning to do all the things in life sober that you got used to doing under the influence of alcohol or drugs. There are basic things like family relations, friends, financial responsibilities, and being emotionally connected need to be relearned. It may sound easy, but sometimes you have no idea how much damage is done until you try to repair what had been broken for years or even decades. I almost lost everything, but I am standing where I never thought I would, and I pray my story will help prevent someone else from going down the same destructive path.